Hey everyone, welcome back to Old Master Channel. Today we're diving deep into the mesmerizing world of Henri Matisse, one of the greatest masters of Expressionism. Over the next 23 minutes, we'll explore 5 of his iconic paintings, uncovering the secrets behind their creation. The Danse. Imagine a circle of human figures, naked, primal, holding hands and whirling in a feverish spiral across a crimson earth. Their bodies seem weightless, almost detached from reality, yet there is a strange heaviness too, as if they're caught between ecstasy and exhaustion. This is Henri Matisse's La Danse, painted in 1910, and it was more than just a painting. It was a thunderclap, a scandal, a revolution on canvas. But here's the hook. When Matisse first showed this piece, many critics called it barbaric. Some even accused him of dragging art back to the Stone Age. Yet today, it is hailed as one of the most important paintings of the 20th century. So what exactly was Matisse doing, and why did it shake the art world to its core? The creation. Matisse painted La Danse in the south of France, commissioned by the Russian collector Sergei Shchukin. By this time, Matisse was already known as the leader of the Fauve, the wild beasts of color. But in La Danse he stripped art down even further. No refined detail, no landscapes filled with nuance, just raw humanity in motion. He wanted to capture something ancient, something beyond civilization, the pulse of life itself. And while the painting radiates joy, Matisse himself was in turmoil. He had faced years of rejection and financial instability. He had been mocked, ridiculed, and dismissed as a clown with colors. La Danse was not just art, it was his defiant answer to the world. This is who I am. Take it or leave it. The artistic process. Matisse's process was almost musical. He laid down vast sweeps of ultramarine blue for the sky, a vibrating field of color that feels infinite. The earth, however, he painted in a violent red, a color that suggests passion, blood, even danger. And then came the dancers, simplified, almost cartoonish in their rounded forms, yet so alive with rhythm you can almost hear the music. He worked obsessively on the circle of figures. If one arm was slightly off, the harmony collapsed. Matisse would scrape and repaint, chase and revise, until the entire composition spun like a perfect wheel. He was not painting individuals, he was painting the collective energy of dance itself. Context. To understand La Danse, you have to place it in its time. Europe was standing on the edge of catastrophe, just a few years before the First World War would erupt. The modern world was racing forward with technology, machines, cities, and chaos. Matisse, however, turned backward, toward the primal, the timeless, the universal. He created a vision not of machines, but of humanity stripped bare, united in ritual and rhythm. Symbolism and interpretation. Look closely and the symbolism emerges. The figures are not anatomically correct because they are not meant to be. They are archetypes, symbols of joy, community, and the eternal cycle of life. The circle they form suggests unity but also a closed system, birth, death, rebirth. Some see it as a metaphor for paradise lost and regained. Others as a celebration of pure bodily freedom. But notice the tension. One figure at the edge seems almost about to fall, as if the dance could collapse at any moment. Joy and danger coexist. Ecstasy and anxiety are intertwined. Matisse, knowingly or not, had painted the human condition. Reception and legacy. When La Danse was unveiled, it caused outrage. Critics derided its childish forms and ugly colors. But Shchukin, the collector, adored it and placed it proudly in his Moscow mansion, where it would inspire generations of Russian avant-garde artists. Today it stands as one of the most iconic images in modern art, a bold declaration that art could be stripped to its essence and still speak to the soul. Poetic close. So what is La Danse? It is not just a painting of bodies in motion. It is a reminder that beneath all our civilization, beneath our machines and progress, there still beats an ancient rhythm. The rhythm of the heart, the rhythm of the drum, the rhythm of life itself. And Matisse, with a few wild strokes of color, managed to trap that eternal music on canvas. La Musique, 1910. Imagine standing in front of a canvas where 2 figures sit in eerie silence. One holds a mandolin, fingers poised yet frozen, as if the music has been trapped inside the painting itself. The other stares forward blankly, her lips closed, her expression unreadable. This is Henri Matisse's La Musique, painted in 1910, and while its title suggests sound and melody, what strikes the viewer first is the absence of sound. Here's the hook. Matisse once said that he wanted his art to be a soothing, calming influence on the mind, something like a good armchair. But when La Musique was unveiled, many critics accused him of creating something unsettling, even disturbing. Why? Because instead of harmony, Matisse gave them silence. Instead of music, he gave them tension. The creation. La Musique was created alongside La Danse, both commissioned by Sergei Shchukin, the visionary Russian collector who believed Matisse was capturing the spirit of a new century. But while La Danse was explosive, wild, and full of rhythm, La Musique was its shadow, its counterpoint. It was painted not as celebration but as meditation. Matisse, at the time, was exhausted from constant battles with the critics. His radical use of color had been mocked, his simplified forms dismissed. He poured his frustration and search for meaning into La Musique. In a way, it was his confession. Music was not just sound, it was silence, struggle, and longing. The artistic process. Matisse's technique in this painting is both bold and restrained. He used wide areas of pure, flat color, bright blues, deep reds, and patches of green. The figures are outlined simply, almost carelessly, with no attempt to imitate realism. Instead, the shapes are symbolic, stripped to essence. The central figure, holding the mandolin, is painted in earthy tones. Her body curves around the instrument, but her face shows no joy, no expression. She could be playing, or she could be trapped in endless rehearsal, unable to let the music free. The second figure, painted in red, sits rigidly with arms pressed to her sides. Her gaze is empty, fixed forward, almost accusing. Notice how Matisse leaves vast spaces of color untouched, creating tension. The silence between the figures becomes almost louder than the music that should be there. It is a symphony of stillness. Context. The early 20th century was a time when art was being shattered and rebuilt. The old rules of perspective, proportion, and realism were crumbling. Cubism was emerging in Paris, led by Picasso and Braque. Futurists in Italy were celebrating speed and machines. Amid all this, Matisse stood apart. He was not interested in fragmentation or mechanical dynamism. Instead, he searched for harmony, for balance. Yet in La Musique, he admitted how fragile and strained that harmony could be. The work also reflects Matisse's lifelong obsession with music. He himself was not a musician, but he often compared painting to composing, a matter of rhythm, harmony, and silence. Here he painted music not as joy, but as discipline, as inner struggle. Symbolism and interpretation. La Musique is full of quiet metaphors. The mandolin represents art itself, beautiful but difficult, capable of joy but demanding sacrifice. The two women embody two sides of creation. One, the performer lost in the act, and the other, the silent witness, the critic, or perhaps the muse. The rigid figure in red can also be seen as a symbol of repression, the weight of society, tradition, and criticism pressing down on the artist. The contrast between her stillness and the mandolin player's curved form suggests the eternal tension between freedom and constraint. Some art historians even see the painting as Matisse's personal self-portrait in disguise. The mandolin player is the painter himself, forever wrestling with the act of creation, while the second figure is the indifferent world, staring back without understanding. Reception and legacy. When La Musique was shown in 1910, the reactions were mixed, even hostile. Many could not understand why Matisse abandoned detail, why the faces looked empty, why the colors screamed so violently. Yet Shchukin adored it, and his patronage allowed Matisse to continue pushing the boundaries of art. Today, La Musique is recognized as a key moment in modern art history, a meditation on silence, discipline, and the mystery of creation itself. It reminds us that music is not only about sound. It is also about what remains unsaid, the pauses between notes, the silence that shapes the song. Poetic close. And so, in La Musique, Matisse paints not the melody, but the silence that gives melody its power. He paints the weight of creation, the quiet labor behind every moment of joy. It is not the music you hear, it is the music you feel, lingering in the air like an unanswered question. Icarus, 1947. At first glance, Henri Matisse's Icarus seems almost childlike. Flat shapes, bold colors, a dark figure suspended against a brilliant blue sky. But beneath its simplicity lies one of the most haunting, timeless allegories in modern art. The story of man's ambition, his hunger to fly higher than he should, and the inevitable tragedy of falling. Here's the hook. By the time Matisse created Icarus, he could no longer stand at the easel. His hands shook, his body weakened by illness, and yet, with scissors and paper, he gave the world one of the most powerful images of hope, ambition, and mortality ever painted, not with a brush but with cutouts. The creation. In 1941, Matisse nearly died after complications from surgery. Bedridden and too frail to paint in his old way, he reinvented himself. With assistants at his side, he cut painted sheets of paper with large scissors, arranging the fragments into bold lyrical compositions. He called this technique drawing with scissors. By 1947 he began work on jazz, a series of vibrant cutouts inspired by circus, theater, and myth. Among them was Icarus. Matisse was fascinated by the myth of Icarus, the boy who crafted wings of wax and feathers, soared into the sky, but flew too close to the sun. His wings melted and he plunged to his death. It is a story as old as Greece, but also as modern as man's restless search for greatness. For Matisse, confined to a chair, Icarus was deeply personal. He had lost physical freedom, but through paper and color he too was flying. The artistic process. Unlike his earlier oil paintings, Icarus was created through collaged cutouts. Matisse painted sheets of paper in bold, saturated colors, blues, reds, yellows, and cut them into shapes. He then arranged them against a backdrop of ultramarine, the color of endless sky. The central figure is stark black, its body floating, or falling, amidst a cosmic void. Its heart, a small red dot, glows like a wound or perhaps like a flame of life. Around the figure burst yellow star-like shapes. Are they stars, explosions, or fragments of a broken dream? The edges of the cut figure are rough, uneven. You can see the jagged traces of the scissors. But this imperfection is deliberate. It makes Icarus fragile, human, vulnerable. Unlike the polished mythic hero of ancient statues, Matisse's Icarus is raw, trembling, almost dissolving before our eyes. Context. The world in 1947 was still healing from the devastation of World War II. Cities lay in ruins, millions dead, and the memory of bombs and fire still burned in the collective memory. In that context, Icarus became more than a Greek myth, it became a modern symbol. It spoke of mankind's ambition and arrogance, of flying too high, of reaching for power beyond our control, and of the catastrophic falls that follow. Some saw it as a metaphor for the war itself, the bright dream of progress turning into fire and destruction. And yet, in the midst of that darkness, Icarus also carried hope. The figure floats against a vast, cosmic blue, not yet destroyed, still reaching. The glowing heart suggests life persists even in the fall. Symbolism and interpretation. The symbolism in Icarus is rich and layered. The black silhouette represents both the individual and humanity as a whole, small, fragile against the infinite universe. The red dot in the chest is the essence of life, desire, ambition, or perhaps suffering. The yellow bursts can be read as stars, guiding lights in the darkness. But they can also be explosions, echoes of war, flashes of catastrophe. The ambiguity is deliberate. Matisse leaves us uncertain. Is Icarus rising toward the stars or falling through fire? Some art historians interpret the painting as Matisse himself confronting death. He was old, ill, aware of his mortality. Yet through art he became Icarus, still daring to fly, even as his body failed him. The painting becomes both a warning and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Reception and legacy. When jazz was first published, critics were divided. Some dismissed the cutouts as childish, a lesser form compared to Matisse's earlier oils. But with time, Icarus became one of the most iconic works of the 20th century. Its bold simplicity, its mythic resonance, and its emotional intensity ensured its place in history. Today it is seen not only as a symbol of Matisse's late genius, but as a universal image of human struggle, the balance between ambition and fragility, the beauty of striving and the inevitability of falling. Poetic close. And so, in a small paper cutout, Matisse captured the eternal truth of existence, that to live is to risk the fall, and to dream is to fly dangerously close to the sun. Icarus does not just show us a myth, it shows us ourselves suspended forever between the stars and the abyss, with only a fragile red heart to guide us. Le Bonheur de Vivre, The Joy of Life, 1906. At the turn of the 20th century, Paris was electrified by change, steam engines, crowded cafes, music halls, and the birth of modern art. But in 1906, in the midst of this restless industrial city, Henri Matisse unveiled something radically different. Le Bonheur de Vivre, The Joy of Life. Here's the hook. Critics didn't just dislike the painting, they were scandalized. Some called it barbaric, others a dangerous attack on beauty itself. But Matisse wasn't trying to please them. He was trying to create paradise on canvas, a place where time, rules, and even perspective collapsed into pure emotion. The creation. Matisse painted Le Bonheur de Vivre between 1905 and 1906, after a trip that changed him forever. He had just returned from Calme in the south of France, where the Mediterranean light dazzled him, seared into his vision, and forced him to abandon realism for pure color. This painting became his manifesto, his declaration of independence from the past. It wasn't just a picture, it was an entire world. The setting is Arcadian, timeless. Naked figures recline in the grass, embrace, dance in circles. It is Eden but stripped of religion, myth, or history. Instead, it is joy, raw, earthly, and human. Matisse worked obsessively, sketching dozens of studies, rearranging figures, bending the rules of perspective until the composition felt like a tapestry, flat, flowing, dreamlike. The artistic process. Unlike the Impressionists before him, who used delicate strokes to mimic light, Matisse used bold, flat planes of pure color. Acid greens, fiery oranges, tender pinks, lemon yellows, they collide and vibrate against one another, not blended but clashing, singing. The figures are simplified, their bodies outlined in flowing curves. They do not inhabit three-dimensional space, but rather seem to float, woven into the landscape itself. The trees, hills, and bodies become inseparable rhythms of line and color. At the heart of the painting is the circle of dancers, a motif Matisse would return to again and again. Their movement is eternal, their joy contagious. What's extraordinary is that Matisse didn't hide his brushwork, he embraced its rawness. The surface feels alive, pulsating, as though the entire painting is breathing. Context. When Bonheur de Vivre was shown at the Salon de Independence in 1906, it was like a thunderclap. The public was still reeling from the Wild Beast exhibition of 1905, where Matisse and his friends, dubbed Les Fauves, the Wild Beasts, had shocked Paris with violent, unnatural colors. But this painting went even further. It wasn't just about color, it rejected Renaissance perspective, naturalistic anatomy, and academic beauty. To critics it looked primitive, even insane. To Matisse it was liberation. He wanted to strip art down to its essence, not to describe reality, but to create an environment where the viewer could feel. "What I dream of," Matisse once wrote, "is an art of balance, of purity and serenity, something like a good armchair which provides relaxation from physical fatigue." And Bonheur de Vivre was exactly that, an armchair for the soul. Symbolism and interpretation. Every detail of Bonheur de Vivre is symbolic. The naked figures are not portraits but archetypes, humanity at its purest. They embody sensuality, companionship, harmony with nature. The reclining couples suggest intimacy and love. The dancers evoke ritual and eternity, joy expressed through the body. The landscape itself curves around them, sheltering them like a womb. But there is tension too. Some figures are isolated, gazing inward. The wild colors can feel dissonant, even jarring. Joy here is not simple. It is ecstatic, overwhelming, almost dangerous. The painting becomes not just a vision of pleasure, but of life itself. Pleasure, desire, isolation, connection, all vibrating in one symphony. Reception and legacy. When the painting debuted, the backlash was fierce. Critics mocked Matisse, collectors hesitated, even fellow artists were shaken. The young Pablo Picasso, upon seeing it, was both threatened and inspired. Some say it directly influenced him to paint Les Demoiselles d'Avignon the following year, a work that would give birth to Cubism. So while Bonheur de Vivre was controversial, it was also catalytic. It broke open the doors of modern art, proving that painting didn't have to imitate reality, it could invent it. Today it is hailed as one of the great masterpieces of early modernism. Standing before it, viewers often feel what Matisse intended, not analysis but sensation, a wave of color and rhythm that engulfs you, takes you somewhere outside of time. Poetic close. And so, in Bonheur de Vivre, Matisse gave us not just a painting but a world. A world of joy, of color, of human connection, a paradise both fragile and eternal. The figures dance still, their laughter echoing across more than a century, inviting us to step inside and taste, if only for a moment, the pure joy of being alive. Luxe, Calme et Volupté, Luxury, Calm and Pleasure, 1904. It begins with a boat ride. In the summer of 1904, Henri Matisse traveled to the Mediterranean coast with his friend Paul Signac, a master of pointillism. The air was warm, heavy with salt, the sea glittered with endless light. Matisse, restless and searching, was about to change the course of modern art forever. And here is the hook. On the easel that summer, Matisse painted Luxe, Calme et Volupté, a painting so radical, so luminous, that critics later said it was the spark that set Fauvism ablaze. It was not only a painting, it was a manifesto. The creation. The title comes from a poem by Charles Baudelaire, where luxury, calm and pleasure, describe a dreamlike escape from the noise of modern life. That is exactly what Matisse sought to capture, a vision of paradise outside of time. The painting shows a group of nude figures resting and bathing in a radiant landscape. At first glance it seems simple, a picnic, a day by the sea. But in reality, it is a revolution in color and form. Matisse worked obsessively, layering pure pigments in tiny, shimmering dots and dashes, borrowing from Signac's technique but pushing it further. His brush did not merely describe the scene, it exploded it into fragments of light. The artistic process. Unlike traditional landscapes, where colors blended to mimic reality, here Matisse shattered the image into pulsating shards. Scarlet reds next to emerald greens. Shocking oranges against electric blues. Patches of lemon yellow that vibrate against violet shadows. At the center, nude figures recline in serenity, their simplified forms melting into the glowing fields of color. They are both human and elemental, part of the rhythm of the earth. The composition does not obey classical perspective. Instead, it unfolds like music, a symphony of repeating strokes, harmonies of hue, rhythm of line. The landscape seems alive, quivering with light, as though the very air is painted. Context. At this moment, Matisse was searching for his artistic identity. He had flirted with Impressionism, studied under academic masters, experimented with pointillism, but none of it felt like his truth. Luxe, Calme et Volupté was his breakthrough. It was painted not in the controlled, meticulous style of Signac, but with passion and instinct. The dots were larger, freer, almost violent in their energy. He was no longer imitating, he was inventing. And he did it with courage. At the time, Paris was still clinging to Impressionism and academic traditions. To abandon realism so boldly was almost unthinkable. But Matisse was willing to risk ridicule to follow the vision in his mind. Color as pure emotion. Symbolism and interpretation. The title reveals much. Luxury, calm and pleasure, not decadence but spiritual abundance. The figures are not individuals but symbols, embodying harmony with nature, sensuality and peace. The fractured light and vibrating palette suggest something deeper, the instability of modern life, the tension between serenity and chaos. Even in paradise, the painting hums with unease, its colors clashing like dissonant chords. Some art historians see in it Matisse's own struggle, his longing for peace, even as his restless spirit pushed him toward upheaval. Reception and legacy. When the painting was exhibited in 1905 at the Salon d'Independence, it was almost ignored. Critics saw it as eccentric, unfinished, too strange. But for the young artist who would soon be called Les Fauves, the wild beasts, it was a revelation. Luxe, Calme et Volupté became the seed of Fauvism, the movement that would shake Paris the following year. Matisse himself called it, the first of my works of power. Over time it came to be seen as one of the most important works of the 20th century, the painting where Matisse broke free, where he chose emotion over imitation, where he declared that art was not about copying the world but creating a new one. Poetic close. And so, with Luxe, Calme et Volupté, Matisse opened the door to modern art's most daring adventure. On a canvas just over 3 feet wide, he captured not just a scene but a dream, a shimmering vision of beauty, joy and freedom. The figures still rest in the golden light, the sea still sparkles, the air still vibrates with impossible color. And as we gaze upon it today, we too are invited into that dream of luxury, calm and pleasure. A dream born from the restless heart of a man who refused to paint the world as it was, and instead painted it as it might be. That's a glimpse into the life and work of this amazing artist. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe and hit the bell. Tell us in the comments which painting moved you most, and remember, art is not just seen, it's felt.